I'm Shelby Holliday, and I am here with Major General Joseph Ryan, commander of the Army's 25th Infantry Division, and we are here in the Luzon Strait. So just to get viewers oriented, that is north of the Philippines' main island of Luzon and just south of Taiwan. Major General, thanks for being here. Thanks for having us here.
My pleasure.
What message does the U.S.'s presence in the Luzon Strait send to allies and potential adversaries in the region?
What it means is we are going to operate and train and partner with our allies and partners in the region, especially those who are our treaty allies, like the Philippines has been since 1951. And what our presence shows here is a commitment. It's a commitment to ensuring that their desire for sovereignty is something that they can count on us to help them attain and maintain.
China has militarized a number of islands in the South China Sea.
Right.
What kind of threat does that pose to your troops and your partners in the Philippines?
Well, it certainly is something we're keeping an eye on. China has decided on some level that they are going to make the rules and they are not going to abide by the international rules-based order that has been in place here for the last 75 years, since the end of World War II. A rules-based order, in fact, that has helped them grow and thrive into the economic powerhouse and world power that they are. And that's troubling. It's troubling for the Philippines, it's troubling for Australia, it's troubling for Japan, all of which are treaty allies of the United States of America. The United States of America is a Pacific power as well. It's troubling to all of us. We simply want to understand on some level why the Chinese are acting this way, why they are deciding that now that the international rules-based order that benefits all is not in their best interests. Of course, we don't know why that is exactly, because we're not really communicating well with them right now. I know there are many in the U.S. government who would like to engage the PRC on this particular topic, and we're open to the dialogue when they're ready to have it.
The call is out there?
It's absolutely out there. It's out there on several levels. And we're ready for that dialogue. And I think it's important to have that dialogue so we can de-escalate. Because right now there's opportunities for escalation that probably don't need to be there.
The exercise we are here to specifically observe is an air assault. Can you walk us through what that looks like, what the mission is, what it entails?
Sure. An air assault operation is designed to provide positional advantage through ownership and occupation of terrain. So we are using some of the many islands in the Philippine chain here in the Luzon Straits to demonstrate our capability to conduct air assault operations both from land forces to another position on land. We've also conducted an operation off of this ship here, the USS Miguel Keith, with embarked forces to one of the islands here in the Philippine chain to the north of Luzon.
And this island is a couple hundred miles from Taiwan.
It is one of the northernmost points in the Philippine chain here in the Luzon Straits, yes.
In the event of a conflict over Taiwan, how strategically important is this island and the islands around it?
Very important. I mean, again, geography matters. The Philippines sits where it sits. I think there's certainly a sense that should conflict occur in Taiwan, that the Philippines would be affected, as would Japan, as would several other nations bordering the South China Sea and in this area of the world.
You mentioned the Philippines is a treaty ally. If
Right.
the Philippines is attacked, the U.S. is obligated to defend it.
That's right.
How difficult is it to defend and fight on that kind of territory?
Well, I mean, again, defending everywhere is defending nowhere. So we certainly wouldn't try to do that. We first off, most importantly, is we respect our Philippine partners' sovereignty. Part of this exercise and what it's grown to from the Philippine side is a recognition that the defense of the Philippines is important to them. When I was here 2 years ago, we weren't discussing this particular aspect of training because it wasn't something that they were necessarily overly concerned about. It's clearly something that they are now.
Something's changed.
Yeah, well,
A lot has changed.
they've recognized that something's changed, and therefore we want to help them with what they want to do. So this is not about the United States coming to the Philippines and exercising what we want to do on their terrain. And I know there's some concern internal to the Philippines about what this expansion of these enhanced defense cooperation agreement sites are and mean for the relationship between the Philippines and the United States here in the Philippines.
What does the U.S. plan to do with those bases?
Well, you know, the difference really between a site that's been designated as an enhanced defense cooperation agreement site versus one that hasn't, we train in both places with the Philippine Army. We absolutely do. The EDCA sites allow us to do a little bit more in terms of developing infrastructure that helps in concert with not just what the Philippine government and the Philippine Army needs, but what we may need.
I think one of the concerns or one of the phrases that I've heard is the U.S. could use these bases as staging grounds against China. Is that what they are?
Well, I think you could feasibly see that they are, but we wouldn't do any of that without the consent of the Philippine government, right? And we really don't have a reason to stage for operations against China, because China is a free and sovereign nation, and as long as they act within the international rules-based order here in the region, they have plenty of room to operate and do what they choose to do, certainly within their own sovereign territory. I think the question becomes when we have disputed territory and how they act in the region with territory that is also claimed by other sovereign nations. There have been international rulings that have designated that terrain as belonging to the Philippines or belonging to Vietnam.
Right.
And yet the Chinese don't seem to want to.
It's not unique to the Philippines.
It's not at all unique to the Philippines. There's several countries that have claims to islands in the South China Sea that the PRC have decided they're not going to respect those claims. So that's a part of the problem, is the lack of dialogue, is the lack of cooperation, the lack of involvement, the lack of will to entertain the idea that they're not the only country operating out here. And so I think it's gotten several of these nations nervous. And I think in large part, several of these nations have then decided, well, our security partner of choice is the United States of America. And so there's a void to fill here that not only do we want to help them fill, but we're obligated to help many of them fill through our mutual defense treaties.
China, the PRC, has been very vocal about its opposition to the EDCA sites and to the U.S.'s strengthening relationships. China says that the U.S. wants to contain it. Is that what the U.S. is trying to do?
No. And I can unequivocally say there is room for China in the international rules-based order here in the Pacific and globally. And we need to open up a dialogue right now. That's what's most troubling is the lack of dialogue.
Concern?
I think so. We don't want a war with China. Nobody wants that. The last thing we want, certainly me as a soldier, last thing I want is a conflict with the People's Republic of China. It will not be good for anybody, not be good for any of us. That said, that doesn't dilute or it doesn't distract me from doing my job, which is to deter conflict from occurring, to keep it from happening, and then if it does happen, to be trained and prepared to fight it. That's my job.
Is the U.S. prepared to fight?
Absolutely. And that's what we're doing here. I mean, I couldn't be prouder about being here on a Navy ship operating with several of our greatest allies in the region, the Filipinos and the Australians, and executing training with them in Philippine sovereign territory. It's just making us better. It's making us all better. So, and it's helping us prepare for whatever contingencies arise. Because the relationships that we build, the interoperability that we build, the familiarity that we build, it goes a long way. The asymmetric advantage of our alliances and partnerships in the region is part of what separates us from the PRC, because they don't have that.
the relationships.
They don't have the relationships, and it's really the envy of the entire world when you look at it, how we're able to build a coalition of allies and partners in the region when there's trouble. Look at what's happened in Ukraine. That said, partnerships and alliances and coalitions don't win wars. Combat credible forces, allied and together, win wars. So if conflict happens, I'm confident we're prepared to fight it.
How different would a conflict in the Pacific be from what we're seeing unfold, the land war in Ukraine?
So, Shelby, that's a great question. We're sitting here in the Luzon Straits on a Navy ship, and I can't see any land with the naked eye from where we sit. Certainly, it would be different from the standpoint of we have to be able to project power in a theater that involves a significant amount of maritime terrain, the sea. The distances that we talk about here are vast. We can put all of the continent of Europe plus into the South China Sea, essentially. So the distances are vast. But in the end, Shelby, and especially where I come from in the 25th Infantry Division, war is about the will to fight and win between armed adversaries on land. And it's about the last 100 meters. And we have to be prepared to fight in this terrain, whether it be on sea, in the air, or on the land. And all the domains, undersea, in cyber, and in space as well. We have to be prepared to do it all. And the United States and our allies and partners hold significant advantages over the PRC today in many of those domains right now, if not all of them.
Not all of them.
There's certainly China's military buildup is astonishing. It's to some it's impressive. It's something we have to keep an eye on.
And it's not showing any signs of slowing down.
It's not showing any signs of slowing down, and in many cases it's accelerating beyond what we're doing. There's no question about that.
Why is the South China Sea so valuable, so important to the U.S.?
So the South China Sea is clearly a strategic maritime area of the world where it's sort of centrally located between nations that are home to 6 out of every 10 people on Earth. Probably soon enough it'll be 7 out of every 10. An incredible amount of the world's commerce transits through the South China Sea, the Luzon Straits, the Malacca Straits, the Taiwan Straits. This area of the world is incredibly valuable from an economic standpoint alone in terms of the amount of goods that pass through here and the amount of people that pass through here on ships, on planes, moving from one place to another. Economic powerhouses like Singapore, like Hong Kong. We talked about Manila, Jakarta, Tokyo, Taipei. These are huge, populous, advanced industrial cities that are incredibly important to the rest of the world. So it's important to the United States for that, but it's also important to the United States, I think, fundamentally because of the value of sovereignty and the nations that operate here, that are here.
Do you see a NATO in Asia in the future?
It's certainly a viable concept. Whether there's a NATO in the Pacific, I think, depends on the nations in the Pacific that would make up that type of structure. You can certainly see something coming out of some of the bodies that exist here, but that's certainly it's certainly an idea that I think has some merit, because right now we operate on, at least the United States operates here on a number of country-to-country mutual defense treaties, and we'd certainly like to see more cooperation among nations, a commitment to come to their aid should they need help. And that's really what NATO is. That's what NATO's been pre-conflict. That's what NATO is now with conflict happening on its borders. It can be a very valuable arrangement.